Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 49, featuring Ravin Dave and his cool new SNKEZ NFT project, talking about sustainability. He's a pretty awesome NFT creator, also a Web3 event specialist. I was able to connect with him in Miami, which was really cool. Also connected with him at NFT NYC. So, we're just out here at these Web3 events. Thanks for joining, Ravin. How you doing today?
I am rocking and rolling. How about yourself?
Rocking in the free world, doing well, thanks.
Yeah.
Glad you're able to make it. So yes, welcome everyone to Web3 Warriors. I'm your host, David Krome, go by Krome in the metaverse, and today we're going to be talking about sustainability in Web3, a favorite topic of Raven's and also a very important topic to myself. And we've talked about this on a few different episodes. We had Mirapolsky in here early on in season 1 with Ravin as well, talking about their Shark Tales project, which was really cool, raising awareness about some different sustainability initiatives that are going on in the ocean and trying to raise awareness around that. And now with his new project, the SNKEZ project, he's got some really cool new awareness that he's raising around sustainability and fashion. So we're going to let him speak to that a little bit. But looking at it from kind of a step back and kind of my high level understanding of how Web3 and blockchain can really impact sustainability, the most important part of it to me is that we see a lot of the criticism of blockchain coming from an environmental standpoint. And so I think it's important to see how not only are those concerns, largely unfounded, even where the blockchain does negatively impact the environment. Potentially, there's a lot of innovation happening to actually flip the script and support new alternative energy, like in El Salvador, for example, where we see they're actually using their volcanoes to mine for Bitcoin. And apparently that's been working out pretty well for them. So there's opportunities to use alternative energy to actually mine for proof of work chains. But then on the flip side with Ethereum, they were getting a lot of criticism for being a proof of work blockchain, and they actually made the choice to switch over into proof of stake, which doesn't use as much energy. So there's a lot of innovation happening to try to lower that criticism, the fact that mining some cryptocurrencies does take up energy. But on the flip side, with these NFT projects like Shark Tales, like SNKEZ, like some other projects that I've heard about, with really just raising awareness around whether it's, ocean health, a lot of waste in the ocean, whether it's sustainable fashion and making sure that we're using sustainable materials. There's just a whole range of ways that the blockchain and NFT projects can actually flip the script and help kind of push the initiative towards sustainability and maybe even more broadly ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance sustainability and improvements in all these different angles. So without going too long-winded on that, I think that you can imagine, where all these NFT projects that are able to create energy around kind of more maybe memes and more like just basic really cool art or comic books. You don't see as many of them actually focusing on helping the planet. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully highlight a few examples and really just maybe spark some inspiration in those people out there just thinking about what kind of Web3 project can I build that'll actually make a difference, So with that, Ravin, I want to jump to you quickly. Maybe before we get into your SNKEZ project, I just want to hear, what have you been up to? What are you working on in Web3? Like I mentioned, we connected in Miami in December, which was really cool at the Bit Basel event that they had out there that you helped put together. So yeah, what's keeping you busy in Web3? And welcome back to Web3 Warriors.
Thank you. You know, it's such a fast-moving space. And I think part of the fast-movingness of the space is to constantly reanalyze it, right? Look back at it, look at it. I think, when we're in the middle of something, we don't always necessarily know what we're in the middle of. And I woke up this morning, and it was one of the calls or something I was on yesterday or the day before yesterday. I think we do this weekly think tank call, and we literally just get, and this isn't happening often. This is just like literally the second week. So we're trying to figure out how to do this weekly think tank call, and get a bunch of people on, and at some point someone said, NFT is like an MP3. How many people were talking about MP3s back in the day, right? It's a file format.
Yeah.
And so I woke up this morning and I'm like, yo, who's down with like, NFT with like MP3? And I'm like, yo, this is the silliest thing. We just spend so much time talking about a damn file format rather than the benefits or what we're going to get out of it or how it's actually helping.
Mm.
And so one of the things we banned this year is that word. Just like it
Really?
was banned in my studio years ago,
So what do you use instead? Just like digital collectible or?
Yeah. Um, and it's not because it's a dirty word and no one wants to talk about it. It's because it challenges us to talk around it and not continually talk about like the vehicle that it is,
Mm.
right? Let's talk about what we're doing with it and the value and benefit that comes as a result of this technology. And let's get into those conversations.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So when you are at events in real life, like you were at the BitBasil event in Miami, right? And obviously the vast majority of the people there are kind of Web3 natives or people that are deep in the space and maybe don't mind talking about the non-fungible tokens and what that means and immutability and all that fun techie stuff. But how do you see that balance happening? Like, do you see more people attending events like that and actually genuinely wanting to learn and kind of starting from a place of not understanding maybe NFTs and Web3? And in that scenario, is it important, like you're saying, to kind of take the more technical jargon out of it?
Absolutely. Like, it's difficult because it was, obviously the event was specifically about, well, it was not just about Web3 and NFTs. It was a combination. And it was really interesting because, one of the roles I had was literally running the stage. And so uh I was able to see, all 60 speakers and who came to watch and listen to all of the different speakers
Mm.
and panels. And it was really interesting because there was a couple people that came every single day religiously and literally just sat there taking notes. And it was really amazing to see because they hung on every word. And even Low came through and he got something out of it too. So I think it's important that we deliver democratized information in a way that anyone can get something out of it and take it away. And it brings me back to DJing. And I did this event in the Lower East Side, and I don't know how, right? Like it was just this crazy moment. But I met DJ Cool Herc.
Oh, nice.
Um,
It's a serious OG.
and yeah, like I mean, and we're talking about, right, like this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop this year, right?
Hmm.
And so it's not just that I met DJ Cool Herc and had a conversation on the street. It was actually after a unfortunate DJing event where we for whatever reason played a little too loud and the cops were called.
Ah.
Right. And so eventually like the party got shut down to some degree. Um so and everyone outside had a good time because it was really loud, but that was the problem, right? so so he pulls me aside in the street and explains to me how I didn't do my job.
Okay.
Right. And so here's the founding father, one of the founding fathers of hip hop, telling me that I didn't do my job as a DJ, and he was 150% correct.
Hmm.
And the reason he was correct was because he said, as a DJ in a club that has a staff with a bar, right, and people, and even though you're doing live performances, you have a responsibility to make that a safe, fun environment that makes money, which is why you are hired. That's your job as a DJ there.
Hmm.
And so you did what you guys wanted to do for yourselves, and in doing so, you failed to do your job as an entertainer. And I'm like, whoa,
Damn, that's heavy.
right? Real talk. And I took it on the chin. And in that moment, and at that point I've been DJing for 20 years, and he was 100% right, but we lost sight of why we were there and what our purpose was, to get caught up in the thrill of I don't know, just playing really loud and having a whole bunch of people on the block turn their heads and they're like, yeah, like, I mean, we when the cops
You're
walked
just
in,
getting
we
lit.
we just,
You're getting lit.
yeah, we thought that we were gonna get the cops to raise the roof. Like we were like, yo, put your hands up, and they're like, yo, put your hands down and behind your back
Oh
if
shit.
you don't turn this down. And you're like, yeah, they're just playing, like, nah. They were real. Like this wasn't playing around, right? And then in doing so, we it wasn't all right because the people at the bar didn't get to make the why they came to work. And so I guess my point is we're in the same situation. I liken that to right where we are now with Web3 and technology. And there's all of this stuff. And if we don't do our job,
Mm.
then we're going to be sitting here in a couple of years having these same conversations, and other people are going to be doing the job for us, and we're going to be upset about the job that they're doing, and now we're going to be sitting here complaining about what's happened since because we didn't go out and do our job. And part of our job is to talk to a wide range of people and talk in a way that connects with them, right, and doesn't talk to them, and allows us to we need to educate with simple terms. And that means getting rid of all of these little acronyms that make us feel cool, WAGMI, good morning, GM, and but it makes it difficult for other people to join the conversation.
I feel you, at least on the NFT perspective. And so when you look at something like what Starbucks is doing, for example, right, where they're kind of making it like a loyalty program using, Polygon NFTs, but not really calling it NFTs. Do you think that's kind of a good direction? Obviously, big corporations might not be the ideal proponents of the proper way in Web3, but I'm kind of impressed by what they seem to be pulling together and how
Yeah,
they're
I
doing.
think Reddit is another great example.
Oh yeah,
right?
Reddit's a good one. Yeah, for sure.
And there's another thing that was, again, just like brought up yesterday, and it might have been one of the rooms. I think it was in a Twitter space last night. And it was just talking about the brands and onboarding brands into this space, and I've spent some time working with brands, and I had the fortunate opportunity to onboard a bunch of brands into Web 2.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember kind of having a conversation with a senior brand director in 2007 explaining why their company as a CPG needed a website and why customer service was so important to be able to have a conversation with your consumer as a brand manager as opposed to just your 1-800 hotline.
Right.
And the concept was so foreign. And to me, I'm like, are we kidding? Like, are we even having this conversation? Like, what are we like? But to them, it was super, super new.
Yeah.
So again, it's this transition that we have to take time and show them the reason and the value. And once we did do that, right? 2 years later, we did this amazing campaign, and it was with the brand and Playboy, and it was in Playboy's 55th anniversary section. And we did 12 pages in the back of the 55th anniversary section of Playboy, and it was all user generated content.
Okay. Nice.
And then this past week I was doing some research, and I happened to type it in, and I come across this article, or no, this book that published the history, the rise of Playboy, and we made it into page 195, right? There's like a full page talking about this Skull Builds Playboy thing that we did.
Nice.
And how it was kind of revolutionary and groundbreaking, especially for a brand like that. And now in hindsight, seeing the way that they came into Web3 and what they did with or what Jen was able to do with them. And that came up last night. I didn't share my example, but it was one of those things where, just as an organization, they were a pretty progressive organization that, took the risk, right? And as a result, like, look at them as a leader, right, from a marketing case study standpoint as a company.
Wait, are you talking about
they were
Playboy
pretty
or Skull?
successful. What's that?
Are you talking about Playboy or Skull?
Playboy.
Yeah.
Well, and Skull worked out too because it allowed them to be bought by Altria, right?
Okay.
And so I guess my point is, right, and I sit in some of these rooms, and you got all these maxis and experts come in, right? Everyone's a freaking expert, and
Yeah, that's for sure.
experts on stuff that they probably, I don't know, been doing a year or two, whatever. So, and they're saying Web 2 is so different than Web 3, and I'm like, how you bring brands in isn't, right? We're like, we're not that much farther advanced than we were years ago. And how you bring brands in is you literally have to handhold and walk them in, but then in a very short period of time, you can get to doing something that's pretty crazy or different or pushing the edge. And I think, a lot of times people, and this is what's happening, I'm seeing happen out there, is that you do have people that don't understand how this works or how brands work, and then they sell some really cool stuff, but it's really difficult, and then it doesn't fully work, and it might work, right? Like the functionality might
Yeah.
work, but the optics and the emotion and all the other stuff doesn't.
So it's like
And
concept before practicality.
yeah, and then all of a sudden the brands are, and same thing in the music industry. You talk to some of these artists, and the artists, publicists and managers, and you know, they're over it. They're over the attitude. They're over that degen, like, I know this, and
Right.
you need me to survive. And they're
Well,
like,
they've been
yeah, you know
failed.
what?
They've been failed by degens, right? Misled. Like you see some celebrities, like what was one? Chris Brown. There was the Porsche one most recently, where they just straight flopped. Like imagine being Porsche and not being able to sell 1,000 NFTs. Like imagine how that must feel, or whatever they were aiming for, 5,000 or whatever. It's just like a brand like that, like taking something on the chin, like that's. And you know that it was just some bad team that like they were convinced to work with that was probably not the best NFT
But
influencers
but I
or
think
whatever.
there's yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think and it's funny because another point that came up, to that point, and this is so very true. What we look at as success may be different metrics than what brands and other people look at for success. And
Hmm.
you know, it may not be a success that we deem it, but from their standpoint, they dip their toes in. Okay, they realize this, but it could have been as simply communications and again onboarding, right? You can't tell me that there's not 1,000 Porsche holders out there that would have loved to have something. It's just they didn't understand it and know why. And it's not, again, like the pricing is a little funny on that whole thing
Right.
too. And it's just why, right? And
Yeah.
and if and if the reason is because, cool, but then let people know that, and that's the challenge. It's
Yeah.
having this transparency. It's having the dialogue and being open and available, and having your senior management or executives available to come into a Discord and talk to people.
Yeah, I think it still comes back to that two-way communication, right? And just like you're saying at the Web2 onboarding and how it was, I mean, I'm still like, there's a lot of corporations that still to this day, maybe they have a Twitter, they have social media, but are they genuinely, engaging in two-way communication? Some still haven't learned that lesson from Web2. So now when we jump into Web3, yeah, it's a whole new value proposition, right? And I think that is being lost on a lot of brands. So when you look into this year, right, obviously you're going to continue to be involved in Web3 events and helping to push things forward. Do you think that that's going to be a major narrative of 2023, like brands really jumping into the space in a real way?
Yeah, it's funny too because sometimes, yeah, you think about this year's budgets are kind of set, but the whole budget and planning process has already been kind of impacted by this. So
Mm.
I do think you're going to start to see more, um, but it's also it's going to keep continuing. Um, whether or not this is the year, I don't think there's any this is the year. I don't think you realize that this is the year until after the year comes and goes and you
Right.
look back at all the years and you're like, well, that was really the year. It's You got to look at it again from a brand standpoint, right? Like you got a tough economy that we're going into. You have arguably a recession that we're in or about to approach, right? You got a market that changes dynamically every, 6 months. So from a forecasting standpoint, it's a very difficult planning exercise to really to get around, what you need to deliver as a business. So when you look at an emerging market, this is such a small market. Like look the actual volume of sales that are happening. Look at the actual number of people that are in here. Then it becomes, well, it's more of why are we getting in here? We either believe in the technology, it's not really the audience size, right? So there needs to be a rationale to spend that money, to take on the risk, to put resources behind a project that goes in there. And so I think, my experience in working with brands and working on the brand side really comes. I built a lot of promotion, communication campaigns, integrated marketing campaigns that use a lot of different levers, so you have a lot of different like media working together,
Mm.
right? And so I think the place that I see really brands this happening, right, is being able to close the loop. And you think about, a lot of brands have incentives, or they try to reward their customers, but how does a customer get that reward and go through a system, right, to activate that reward and keep track of it, right?
Mm.
And so that is done by a login or a card or something. And so, you know, I think the technology can help close some of the loop, but at the same time, it also raises some other issues where now all of a sudden your transactions are public, right? So we're in this transition. Web3 is not anonymous. Web3 is transparent,
Right.
right?
Maybe
So
to a fault.
so
Some
Starbucks,
might
look at
say.
that, right? It makes sense for them to start with a loyalty program. And I think the way that they're doing it is going to be the model that brands are going to start to look at. And so that's why I'm really, really interested right now, is partnering with technology and figuring out how we can use these different pieces of technology. And then, down the road, we'll be able to go back and, have ancillary lines of revenue where we can, work with brands to help onboard based on the use cases that we've developed. So for us this year, it's really about developing, use cases that inform our decision making about what technology we use, how we describe it, and how we weave it into the story and put it out there to interact with and engage with people. And then from that, right, like probably next year and the year after is when you'll really see brands getting involved, because then you'll have enough use cases, and you can explain and deliver rewards through SMS. But then it challenges, or it begs the question, do rewards need to be on chain?
Well, I think there's advantages and disadvantages, but to your point about Starbucks, I think it'll be an interesting use case to see, are there any disadvantages? And I do think that having that transparency, especially in a metaverse where you can go kind of compare your loyalty to other people, and maybe you gamify the whole experience, you can like win a free coffee by engaging in whatever thing, there's a lot of different angles they could go. And I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves. To your point, there are some limitations, but also huge opportunities, right? I love the marketing perspective that we've gotten so far. I think we're dropping some nuggets for some brands out there who might be curious about wading into these Web3 waters. So I did want to ask, just before we get into the sneaks and further sustainability conversation, what are you looking forward to this year as far as events? Obviously, I think you're continuing to work with BitBasel. That's all the way in December. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope I can get back out to Miami again. But do you have anything else like on the horizon that we can look forward to? I know you're out in LA, right? They got NFT LA kind of coming up soon too, right? So what do you got on the
Yeah,
go?
yeah. I guess we are. It's we're still in the planning phases for this year, and probably will be through February. Really working on two projects. One being Aquaverse, which has been an evolution of Shark Tales into kind of a larger, more macro ocean, so to speak. And so that's again still focused on ocean conservation and using art as a way to introduce people to ocean conservation, and use technology as a way to further and deepen the story and the engagement. And then the other side of it is Holotopia, where we're focused on fashion sustainability. And I think like when you first jump off into a project, it's you're kind of at the surface and the tip of the iceberg, and as you start to go down and deeper, you realize that there's much more to it. So I think what we're trying to do is really define who we're talking to. You have this Web3 audience and you have this Web2 audience. And to be honest, I really like working more in the Web2 space, and bringing Web3 to Web2 as opposed to, I don't know. I feel like we're just talking the same talk around and around, and it's a big echo chamber of Web3. And quite frankly, like most of the people that I hear talking in Web3, like just don't really like. You have some experience, or you got lucky because you bought an ape in, or like it just the experience doesn't necessarily add up to the output, and so there's just a lot of noise as opposed to signal. And I feel that at this point, if we really want to deliver signal, we have to find the audiences. And so this past year, I really spent a lot of time with Sustainability Leadership Club. And now it's funny because now there's a lot of people from the Web3 space that have come into SL. And I'd rather talk about sustainability from a macro level. And again, like Web3 is just one small piece. It's a much larger conversation. And sustainability is a conversation that's been happening for decades that people just don't understand.
I
And
think
there's
that it's
reasons.
slowly coming to like kind of an awakening, I would say, these days. And a lot of people, you still get the political kind of criticism of it, right? People see ESG and they just get cynical and think it's a bunch of BS and corporations trying to, but to your point, I think sustainability, it's been a decades long slog trying to make it an actual priority, right? So sorry, I cut you off there, but yeah, I'm just.
No, that's and so this year it's really about just let's have a conversation about this. Let's just start to speak about what this is, and get to a general understanding, a general frame of reference, so that we can then just have a conversation, right? It's very difficult to have a conversation if you have two people that have different frames of references. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have. Like everyone has their own frame of reference, and we have our egos, and we're unwilling to change our perspective to see another side.
Yeah,
And
that's
so what we want to do is you go to or create events that are outside of the Web3 sphere. We do have a new partnership this year with World Trade Center, so that's super
oh
exciting. It's
wow,
been
yeah.
years in the work,
I
a
remember you
full
mentioning
year.
it before.
Yeah, and it's finally coming through, and so we'll be bringing Aquaverse and hopefully Holotopia to World Trade Center in October. I say that gently because it's shifted a couple times.
Well, hey, good luck with that. That sounds like super epic. I remember when we were in NYC, you were telling me about it
Yeah.
actually. So very cool. I
So
hope I can
hopefully
check that out.
this next time we get there, we'll set up some tours and get everyone down to the campus. So I think that's going to be that'll be exciting. But again, it's tough. It's tough because everyone wants answers, and this year is a funny year. So for us, it's just we're looking for the opportunity to get in front of people and share the story, whether that's on stage, it's on screen, and really just try to start the conversation and define or help further clarify or define what sustainability is. And then this past year was a shift into the 17 sustainable development goals, um, as part of our strategic foundation of how we go about not only talking about it but then implementing it within our strategy, as well as our partners and the people that we work with. And so that's one of the things we do with Holotopia, is really focus on the 17 sustainable development goals, and defining what those are, and then how you can take a holistic approach to implementing those, or a couple within to your brand. And that's really what we started off with Holotopia back in September.
Hmm.
We had seven fashion brands, and for the most part, there was a mixed level of sustainability in there. But just starting this conversation and bringing it forward, and then this year, it's really identifying what that is, and then how we can build content and programming around this to onboard and educate. Um,
No doubt.
and it's interesting because you have to take a holistic approach, right? The way we look at it is there's three different motivations people have when it comes down to this conversation, right? You have the ecologist who sees the world as one, right? Where human beings and nature are a symbiotic relationship that needs to work together in order to progress and survive,
Mm.
right? Then you have the environmentalist perspective, which is you have humans and the planet, and nature and the planet are separate from the human race, and we must save nature and the planet in order to survive as the human race.
Okay.
See the subtle difference
It's a
there,
subtle difference,
right?
yeah.
And the economist, right, understands the measures of sustainability from a consumer-led culture, right, in terms of treating finite resources as an income, but has faith that the market and business and technology will lead us through and avert this crisis, right,
Mm.
and we will sustain as a population. So there's a very wide range of perspectives that people have across those three. And we like to have three because then this way we're not as polarizing. Um,
I like that.
and really, rather than, you're doing bad and you're doing this and really kind of like banging people over the head with the 10% of global CO2 emissions and the 79 trillion liters of water that's consumed and the 35% of oceanic microplastic that comes from washing your clothes that are polyesters and these forever fabrics, right?
Mm.
Like, we could get into that, but we're not seeing that is the way that people react in a positive way. And I think big tobacco, like, and they knew this, right? Like they probably knew
Yeah.
this, where in Europe you have these horrible ads that are on cigarette packs to show you what happens
Yeah,
if
we
you
have those
use
in
it.
Canada here too.
Yeah, so they have they actually have like an inverse impact. They have the
Mm.
opposite impact. It
Mm.
doesn't actually lower it. It triggers it triggers something in the consumer to want more, and the people that wouldn't normally smoke aren't going to smoke for whatever their reason is. So you're actually like almost increasing the amount within that concentrated population by showing these negative things, right? And so
Interesting.
if we look at that and we say, well, we want to have a positive impact, we can't come out the bat and start knocking people over the head like whack-a-mole with facts and you polluter and it's kind of contrary to human nature because you want to call out the other party.
Better to acknowledge good things than to acknowledge the harm being done, right?
Well, and hence the opportunity, I think, with educating. We can acknowledge the harm, but you can't onboard someone into Web3 by knocking them on the head and telling them how bad they are in Web 2. That's just not going to motivate them,
Yeah.
to come over. And I think that's the conversation that's shifting with brands that I saw last night was, well, maybe we don't come about this as us versus you, and you need us to get into here.
Hmm.
Let's have a more open and sustainable conversation.
Definitely makes sense. I mean, yeah, there's something to be said about trying to be more encouraging rather than, yeah, demonizing or whatever the case may be. But yeah, no, it's exciting. So with that, so are you saying that the SNKEZ project kind of grew out of Holotopia and the kind of sustainability fashion emphasis that your team's kind of working on there?
So it's actually threefold. The SNKEZ started when I don't know, when NFTs, like, it was like one of the first, it was one of the first NFTs, I guess, or pieces of digital art that I made and put on chain. Um Back in, like, I think March 2020, or it might have been 2021. And at the time I was coming out and doing a lot of packaging design and client work, and we were doing a lot of mock-ups, and we have a lot of these kind of like base blank templates that you then create product concepts from. And so I don't know, it just got it was the first piece of digital art that I sold. And it was a collector over in Hong Kong, and they got in touch with me and they're like, I want a pair and I want two pairs, and what do you think the fair price is? And then it's just, the project never went anywhere because I didn't there was just a lot of things going on, and it just kind of resonated in the back of my head, and it came up a couple times. And so as we moved into Holotopia, I think my partner JJ challenged me about, having a side release, like a passion project. And I'm like, I'm passionate about all this. And she's like, exactly, that's the problem. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
need another project. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's a creative outlet. I haven't been writing a lot of music since I moved to LA and then getting into this space. And when you get into the brand conversation, and so for me, it's a weekly creative outlet and a challenge. It's also an opportunity to talk about social topics. I haven't gotten into that yet, but we're about to.
Mhm.
And then it's also an exercise because I was trying to explain to my partners about how we can start to use digital to create concepts that don't exist yet and manifest these into life.
Mm.
And so when I started to look at DressX and I started to look at a lot of these fashion sites that had some wearable fashion, and you start to look at the materials, right? Now it's all pixels, but literally people are like digital polyester. I'm like,
Come on.
and this is my problem with this whole Web3 like universe, metaverse, like BS, right? Is that we're literally rebuilding the shit that we already have here in like the real world. So what fun is that? Like, why would we rebuild what we already have, right? So sustainability, when you talk about sustainability, really focuses on providing the best outcomes for both human and natural environments now, indefinitely, and into the future, right? So I thought that this was a good way to not just make sneaks, but to start making sneaks that were made out of just different materials that are currently being developed or may be developed in the very near future that come from nature. And so the idea is, what if you have a sneaker that's made entirely from natural materials, and that at the end of its life cycle, it can be converted back or redirected back into the manufacturing process in a way that we call, or what we start to talk about as having circular properties in the economy, or a circular economy, where you're using the resources from the things that have already been created to go into the next thing that's being created, as opposed to starting from virgin materials and extracting those materials out of the earth or the different elements, and then making these materials that at the end of your life cycle, they're either burnt, buried, or dumped into the ocean, which is most of the stuff that we are either wearing or making or do. And that's the challenge, right? Is this linear manufacturing model that we currently operate across most industries.
Awesome. So I'm looking at this one with the reishi mushroom. I think this was the first one I was able to collect that I noticed. And I really like the little one-up mushroom on the back of the heel. But looking at that sustainability, to your point, right? The fact that you can make leather out of the reishi mushroom. And it looks pretty cool. I don't know if the actual finished product would look that sleek.
Yeah.
But yeah, so practicality, right? So now you're raising awareness. You're making this really cool, beautiful image of shoes that are using reishi mushroom leather. So what's kind of the next goal? What's the goal of the project? Obviously, passion project. It is what it is. You're just showing what's possible. But best case scenario, what would you like to see kind of spinning out of this project?
So the way that again, this is kind of a much longer term. So literally this year is really about utilizing digital as a storytelling medium, and then starting to parallel path. And one of the things we're starting to do is now reaching out to different manufacturers and different resource providers. And so the concept with Holotopia is that it's essentially a collective. And as we bring more people into the collective, and then we're also able to start to partner with organizations or manufacturers and build these relationships. There starts to be resources that can be shared at scale with the group. And when we get to a certain point, and it's going to be figuring out what that point is, right? You start to have economies of scale, and you start to have bulk ordering, and you start to have some of this stuff that helps to cut down on the excessive waste that's generated and created within the fashion industry. Literally, since 2020, the amount of clothes that get manufactured has nearly tripled, and people wear less clothes, they have more clothes, and there's no stop of this. This is just going to keep going, right? Because people want something cheap and they want it fast and they want it immediately. And the further they are from the source of the creation or the manufacturing, and the more different middlemen or middle people that you have in the manufacturing process, the least likely people are to care about unethical behavior that happens within that manufacturing or supply chain creation, right,
Yeah.
of the product. And so when you have a $27 dress, right, where the original material may be sourced from three different or two different places and then shipped from, say, it comes from China, and then it goes from China, and then the raw material goes over to Thailand for processing, and then the different pieces go over to Portugal for sewing, and then they go over to here, and then all the pieces come together, and you as the end consumer, all you care about is the $27 piece at the end, and getting it delivered from Amazon the next day. And so we want to take that concept of farm to table, right? In the same way that had an impact on the way people started eating more healthy, and start to use that concept from a manufacturing. And if not, right, even if there are all of those pieces, then blockchain gives the opportunity for transparency, right? And so what we're really starting to play with now is how do we make some of these things that we are imagining, whether it's kelp leather or fungi leather or these different types, right? And then looking at the different rubbers and replacing, petro with starch or corn base or some different biomaterials, and really starting to experiment in that place. But as well as from the storytelling standpoint, because I think that's what some of this is missed, right? Like, it's always been, oh my god, end of the world's coming, end of the world's coming. But you know people like stories.
That's the
And
truth. And
people
people
are
like
emotional.
emotions. They like emotions. Yeah, exactly. Like, give them a reason to care outside of just doom and gloom and you're doing bad things. Stop doing bad
Yeah,
things, you know?
so this is just like a kind of a case study to see how people react to continually put out stuff. And then I'm starting to weave in kind of manufacturer materials, because there are people that are starting to create registered and trademark materials and processes. There's some really amazing brands out there. And so I'm a big proponent of show me, don't tell me.
Right,
And
no
so
doubt.
this is really just a show me, don't tell you, show you, don't tell you type project, where give it like, let's get to 36, let's get to 42,
Right.
right? And it's also interesting as an artist, because if I don't buy a couple copies, then I don't get my
They're
own.
gone, yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that's the truth. That's the truth. You got a few good collectors coming through, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more as they come through. So that's really cool. Everybody can check them out on OpenSea. That's SNKEZ, or Z for my American friends. Sneaks,
Sneakers.
spelt real funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really
It's hard
cool.
to
Yeah.
find
So
the name.
show me, don't tell me. I dig that. And I like what you're saying about the farm to table example on the food side, right? Which has taken off, and we see obviously organic and non-GMO, and really just wanting to support sustainable farming, all that kind of stuff. So on the supply chain, like you said, there's a future where all of these steps from the very beginning of the sourcing the leather, sourcing the material, all the way through to the shipment and the selling on the consumer side is all tracked on the blockchain. Is that kind of the main way that you see sustainability really being helped by the blockchain in Web3, more so even than maybe raising awareness and funds through
So I
NFTs?
think, yeah, like I think that's a piece of it, right? And there's a challenge there, because then it comes down to the integrity of the data at the source, and whether or not that data is going to, get compromised before it gets put on chain. And then all of a sudden you have faulty data on chain, and so that's no better than having no data, right?
Right.
So I think there's those logistical kind of incentive, just practical challenges. But I like to fantasize when we start to think about and really like thinking about this technology, right? like, what is the difference? And this technology allows us to own digital assets, right? And once you have ownership of digital assets, you now have the ability of those assets to have a personality, to have an identity, right? And so when we look at sustainability and we look at kind of the real shift that has to happen, it's actually like economic shift, as well as just a perspective and a mindset. It's moving from this linear to this circular model, and in order to do so, right, you need to decouple revenue from or volume from profit,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And so if you decouple your volume from your profit, meaning that you're right now it's based on how many sneakers that you can sell, right? And so you go and create what you think, and you manufacture a whole bunch, and then you go out and try to push it out there, and the ones that don't sell, then you pay someone to get rid of them,
Hmm.
and they get rid of them, right? And so if we're going to decouple that volume from the profit, you need to find other ways to make profit, right? And so when we start to look at circular economics, right, you have to it has to be by design, right? You
Right.
have to design these to last longer. Well, now if you're designing them to last longer and to have, more owners and more users per product item, right? There's no secondary market that's set up. If you think about the concept of a secondary market, right, that we're so, adamant about here in the NFT space, like that doesn't exist in the real world, right? Like
Yeah.
you have a used car lot,
Well, in
okay,
art,
but
in the art space, it exists a little bit, but yeah.
exactly. There's a little bit there, but we're in a disposable society, so we're not trained or we don't have necessarily systems in place, and it's also kind of stigmatized, right? You buy
Yeah.
something new or you buy something used.
Oh, you
Well,
going to the
you
thrift
know,
store? Are you a bum?
so it's destigmatizing kind of these circular properties and then figuring out a way to make those profitable, right? So that your volume isn't what's driving all of your profit. And then when you start to decouple, right, and you start to find these other ways, and whether it's upcycling or secondary market, or being there's incentive program, or maybe you're paying to earn, or you're wearing to earn, right?
Hmm.
And then when you start to embed technology in here, you just have to figure out, well, the decoupling of that technology, how does that technology come out of these items? And so it's like, well, if you're making your tags in polymer plastic, right, and you're claiming to be sustainable, yet you're putting these forever pieces on all of these things so that, sure, those pieces can come to life and talk to you, right? Well, at the end of its life cycle, it's you're still throwing away millions of pieces of plastic. So it's thinking about, well, can we make it with a material that has value so that at the end of the life cycle, there's incentive there for someone to decouple those pieces, because they can then take this piece and sell it back to someone, and it can be remanufactured into the next piece, as opposed to going directly to the grave.
No doubt. No, that makes sense. I mean, so you think that that's part of the solution, is actually kind of gamifying, like you say, maybe where to earn, maybe recycle to earn, and maybe a whole kind of ecosystem that not only supports the circular economy, but actually incentivizes it and maybe even makes it fun, dare I say, to
Yeah,
partake?
I mean, so check it. Like, imagine like this right here. I'm rocking it, and
Mm,
big up and shouts to JJ. It came from Ten Tree,
nice.
and just their approach, even, right, like where they're planting trees, and then you get the verification of the carbon offset, right, that came from that garment. So not just is this a normal garment, but this garment's it's been carbon offset, it's made from organic and sustainable cotton, so they claim, right? But you know, there's no way to necessarily verify these things. And so we still have to figure out how to get this information from the source verified, and then educate people about what that means, let alone put fun, cool stuff and experiences and programming around that
Right.
for it to continue to entice and keep people playing along. And it's got to be profitable for the people in the value and supply chain. And we're also talking about two additional, taking that single bottom line and moving it into a triple bottom line when you move to a circular, economical approach, right? And it's not just profit, but it's the people on the planet, and you're serving those three bottom lines, and that's a difficult conversation for any VC or investor, or when it comes down to financing, right? And so my question is, within the ESG space, are investors ready for triple bottom lines? Are they really willing to put their money where their mouth is when they say that they want to support climate change? Because we're not going to be able to change the impact we have on the client or climate with a linear model that is about maximizing profit and return at all costs.
Yeah. So something's got to give, basically, right? Capitalism has its place. We're all for free markets to an extent, but something's got to give. Something's got to evolve and shift, right? I was wondering, do you have any plans for the metaverse or bringing this kind of sustainability effort into the metaverse? And how do you see kind of the metaverse and meeting in the digital space kind of influencing the overall sustainability in Web3?
I see the metaverse as a functioning ecosystem, right? We're in the metaverse right now. We're you and I, we're in the metaverse with whoever else is watching and or part of this, and whoever comes into the future, right? The metaverse is brought to life by humans. Metaverse don't exist without humans and don't exist without technology. So it's the combination of those. So I work in the metaverse on a daily basis. In terms of like little microverses, that are like digital arenas and little environments. We see it as taking the metaverse to the people. So when we work in immersive spaces, right? Like I looked at BitBasil as one big kind of metaverse, and then from there you could go into the virtual metaverses or whatnot. So it's really about bringing the metaverse experience to life in an immersive physical IRL environment, and doing it with big screens, and doing it with immersion, and doing it with kind of this full kind of all-encompassing approach, so that it's an easier jump into the actual virtual. If you put a metaverse on the screen that's 60 feet long and 15 feet tall, it's a much different experience than strapping a eye headgear to your head. And
Right.
And sure, we could do that too, but I think like putting it up on stage is huge. And for me, the game changer was when I saw Kane and Lowe when we did Holotopia, and they brought the metaverse to life and went through, Jigar and Pooh Man and everyone's studios and
Earplugs
stuff.
place. I remember seeing the video of that. Yeah.
That hit me. I was just sitting there eating. I'm like, whoa, this is, and I knew what they were doing, but seeing it and feeling it, I'm like, yo, never again. I'm like, I always want huge LED screens, and we're going to put the metaverse in real life size, and it's a whole different conversation.
No doubt. I can definitely see that. And just shout outs to the metaverse. I'll just do a quick plug for our little art space. I've got your cool Pineapple Express kicks up in our little metaverse art space, which we're going to be updating shortly. But if you go to web3warriors.io, that's for any listeners, anybody can go check it out. Our guest book is officially live and saving. So if you go to web3warriors.io, sign the guest book, we'll have some fun wearables that will be given away in the near future. So that's just a little plug there. And we love the metaverse here at Web3 Warriors, so we're going to keep pushing it. And I think that there is a big opportunity for the sustainability and for those tours, like you were just saying, Ravin. And what about on the DAO side? Do you think that DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, are going to play a major role kind of helping to push sustainability forward, or not necessarily?
I think DAOs need to figure out how to be sustainable themselves.
No doubt.
The whole DAO thing, I just, yeah. I think it's another conversation down the road. I gotta find a couple and get further in to see. But I mean, DAOs are just organizations that include people and are driven by the technology to not have to have everyone work together, but you have to have everyone work together in order to have an organization and a community. Yeah. So
it forces that difficult balancing act,
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So I think we'll come back to that one. We'll see where I think there's years to go, just because you say, what do you trust more, a DAO, a collective, a company, or the government? And
Mm,
I feel it's like collective,
right,
DAOs are
right.
still feeling a little cultish to me, and I get
Yeah.
scared of groups of people, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm involved with a couple kind of in our building phases with the Dream Conduit and Storytime DAO, and it's definitely not an easy feat, but I think it's a worthy one for sure. Yeah, Ravin, what about looking at these sustainability projects? Is there one that's kind of jumped out to you outside of your own, of course, that you think is really interesting that you just want to mention quick before we wrap up here?
I think there's a lot, and I think impact is something that is very important. I think there can be a lot more done in the impact space, and I do think that companies like Chainlink are going to be super important. I think oracles are going to be really important, and really it comes down to being able to track the integrity of the data. And actually there's one, I'll give one shout out to a new company that I was invited to work with Planned Parenthood a couple weeks ago to do some brainstorming with a bunch of other thought leaders.
Mm,
And there's this gentleman there, a couple people from the Starling Lab, and what they are doing is absolutely incredible with how they're looking into the war crimes and essentially capturing genocide and war crime, and ensuring that it's on the blockchain, right, forever. It can't be deleted, but it's also not personally tagging the people in order
mm,
to make them susceptible to sharing that information. So
wow.
I think the work that they're doing, if you get a chance, just Google this. It's literally the Starling Lab, and I think it came out of Stanford.
Darling
um,
Lab. All right. We'll definitely Google that.
yeah.
And shout out to Liana. I know she was also working on some stuff in Afghanistan around this as well, just kind of tracing the atrocities and keeping record of it. That's a very important social, sustainable element as well. That's very possible in blockchain. Awesome. Thank you, Ravin, for bringing that up. And thank you for this awesome conversation. I think we'll wind down here. We're going to be continuing the sustainability conversation next week on Web3 Warriors at 12 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you're able to join us. Until then, we'll catch you in the metaverse and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Ravin. Did you have anything else you want to add?
No, just blessings, positive vibes, and let's just keep digging in and doing the work. There's a lot of work across a lot of different topics and places, and there's a lot of opportunity that we have to make positive impact and progress. And I think that's what we just got to stay focused on. So
That's what's up. That's
thank you for
inspiring,
having
man.
me.
Thank you so much, Ravin. And thank you to
Appreciate
everybody who's
it.
tuned in. And we'll be live on the podcast networks. Till then, catch you in the metaverse. Peace out.
Peace.